Time to work on the business end of the tripod. Start with this piece of 1x3 that's 3.5 inches long. On one end, mark a spot exactly in the center. Measure from this end that you just marked the spot in the center. Measure up 1 3/8 of an inch. Make a mark in the center 1 3/8 of an inch from that end. So now we have a mark here centered in the edge and a mark here centered in the top 1 3/8 of an inch in. Down here at the other end on the edge, make a mark centered on the edge 3/8 of an inch in from the end. Turn it over and make the same mark on the other side, because we're going to have to drill a hole all the way through this. I'm going to start by drilling a 1/4 inch hole on this mark here on the edge. There's the mark on the other side. So I need to drill a 1/4 inch hole all the way through this. So I'm going to drill halfway from one side and then turn it and drill the rest of the way. Next, I want to drill a 3/8 hole into the spot that's marked on the end. I want to drill this to a depth of about 1.25 inches. Lastly, I'm going to drill a 3/4 inch hole all the way through. This hole should end up intersecting with this hole. Put it on the dowel and make sure that it can move smoothly. Now before I get this all put in place, I want to seat this 3.5 inch carriage bolt into place. Now if I was making this for a right-handed person, I would put the bolt in like so. But since this is going to be for a lefty, I think it'll be better if I turn it this way and then put the bolt in like so. Next, I want to install my other threaded insert into this hole in the end. I've put a number 8 by 1/2 inch wood screw into each of these holes in the stops, making sure that the point isn't poking through to the opening. Now I want to take one stop and slide it on the shaft and just slip it down to the bottom. Then I'll put on the second stop. Next, I want to position this top piece that I just assembled. For me, I wanted it lined up this way. Then I'll slide the stop up to hold it in place. Now I want to set this so the top of the dowel is just a little bit lower than the surface of this. That looks pretty good right there. So once I got that in the right place, I'm going to carefully tighten up this screw in the stop. Then I'm going to take my 1/4 inch fender washer and install it on top with the last 8 by 1/2 inch screw. I'll carefully screw this into that hole that's drilled in the end of the dowel. Because the dowel was set a little bit lower than the top of this, we'll be able to adjust the tension on this by tightening or loosening this screw. Want that to be able to move freely but not be sloppy. Now I'm going to loosen this knob up and slide the dowel down so the end of it here is a little bit above the ground. Anywhere from like 3/4 to an inch or something, just so it doesn't hit on the ground. Once I get that in position, I'll tighten this up again. Now I'll take this lower stop and just for looks I'll try and line up the screw so it's in line with this screw. That looks pretty good. And I can tighten this screw up now. So now this lower stop will keep the end of the dowel from hitting the ground when the tripod's lowered. This 2.5 by 3/4 piece of 1/2 inch MDF is called the bracket. I need to make 3 marks on it along the center line at 3/8 in from each end, and then the third mark is at 1 1/8. The marks at 3/8 and 1 1/8 get a countersunk screw hole. The other 3/8 mark gets a 1/4 inch bolt hole. The bracket is going to attach to this piece that we drilled that 1/4 inch hole right in the middle of. It's going to be something like that. Now this might end up being a little bit wider than the thickness of this. It's going to go on like so. So if it happens to be a little bit thicker, you want to make sure that whatever edge is to the outside, you want to make sure that that's nice and flush. So in my case, I want this to be flush. If you had this configured the other way, then you'd want this edge to be flush. So I've got it all lined up how I want it. I'm going to drill it and attach it with 8x1 screws. Now sometimes when attaching things like this, you'll find that no matter what you do, you just can't get this held tightly enough when you screw it together, and you end up getting a gap here. So here's what you do if that happens. So take the screws back out. Now if you're doing this right from the start, make sure that you line it up first and drill the screw holes into this using the proper sized bit. So now what I'm going to do is take on the bracket and drill out these screw holes with a bit that's large enough that this screw will be able to pass right through it. Now when I line these two things up and go to screw them together, I shouldn't get that gap. Much better. This assembly is going to mount onto this bolt like this. But before you put it in place, install a 2-inch carriage bolt into it with the head on whatever side is to the inside. Once this bolt is installed, you can attach the assembly with a washer and a wing nut. We're down to our last couple of parts. This last piece of 2x3 that was 2 1/4 inches long gets a 1/4 inch hole in it, centered 1/2 inch in from one end. This piece of 1/2 inch MDF that was 2 1/2 by 4 1/4 gets 2 countersunk screw holes, 3/8 of an inch and 1/2 inch in from each edge, and a 1/4 inch bolt hole, 1 3/8 of an inch in from the other edge, centered. And now this slides onto this bolt and gets secured with a washer and a wing nut. So now you can see that the top of the tripod is capable of being adjusted this way, and around this way. Remember those 2 smaller knobs we made. One of them gets the 2-inch carriage bolt seated into it. Once that's firmly seated in place, put on a washer and a hex nut. Now this knob with the 2-inch bolt threads into this threaded insert. And once it's tightened up to the shaft, it'll hold this in place. Loosen it off, you can swivel it around. And if you think you want this to be sticking out longer like a handle, just use a longer bolt. The 1.5 inch carriage bolt gets seated in the other knob. I'm going to secure that with a nut, but I haven't got a washer on here. This knob is going to fit up through this hole, and that's what the camera is going to attach onto. Time for my mouse pad. I'm going to cut a 2-inch square of this stuff. There, that looks pretty good. Now I need to make a 1/4 inch hole right in the center of this. Now you can try drilling this hole or cutting it or whatever. If you happen to have a punch, that works pretty good. Just line it up. And cut my hole. And if it happens that the punch is smaller than 1/4 inch, Well, that's good too, because that'll help keep this bolt from falling out. I'll just slip the mouse pad over top of the bolt, see how it fits. And that looks pretty good. I can see the bolt is sticking through about 1/8 of an inch, and that should be perfect for attaching the camera. The mouse pad I used was about 1/8 of an inch thick, but if yours happens to be 1/4 inch, you might find that this bolt doesn't stick up enough for you to attach a camera. The easiest way to fix that is to simply switch to a 2-inch bolt. You might have to add a couple of washers in here to get the bolt to stick out the desired distance of 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. So now we'll pretend that this wooden camera here is an actual camera. Just put it on top, line it up on that bolt, and tighten the knob. That threads into the camera and attaches it firmly on top of the tripod. You can adjust it this way, adjust the angle, tighten up that wing nut once you get it all set, and this can adjust it this way. So that's the finished tripod. The height will adjust from this lowest setting up until that screw that's in the side of the dowel reaches the top. That would be the highest setting. That looks pretty good. On my own tripod, I made this longer top piece that I can put on in place of the regular top. What that allows me to do is bend it like this and be able to shoot down on top of something. Something else I can show you with mine is that over time it seems like the pole and maybe even the legs have warped a little bit. You can see how this doesn't quite line up anymore. But that doesn't affect the operation of the tripod in the slightest because the top is fully adjustable. Since I'm intending to give this to someone as a gift, I might use these nice handles that I have in place of the wing nuts up top. Haven't decided what I like better. These do seem like they'd be a little bit easier to use. I also might put some clear polyurethane on this, but if I do, I'm not going to put any on this lower part of the shaft that needs to slide up and down, nor would I put any places like the top of the legs or in here where any two pieces rub together. That might cause it to bind. When folded up, makes a nice light little package. Thanks for watching.